So, in this second part of title for immovable property, we will be looking at some of the other elements of the title apart from the ones we saw in the part 1. So, in part 1, we talked about possession, legal rights, and equitable rights for a title, which were very primary uh, in considering the sale of a real estate property. Now, we're going to look at some other elements of the title which may prove to be crucial when it comes to investing in real estate. So, first, let's talk about water rights. So, with every land and real estate property, we have the situation whether the water is available. Usually, as throughout our civilization, uh, humans have relied on water, either river or ocean waters, or rainwater, or groundwater, and it is important to understand that not every land parcel has access to water. So, in most of the cases, the water is supplied by different irrigation methods, and especially in the case of agricultural land, uh, availability and access to water is very, very important. So, one of the element of the title is also if water is available and whether who has the rights to access water. Second, we're going to look at a little bit about minerals and mining rights. Now, who owns these rights? These are usually with the government. So, every land which may have a potential for mining or extracting minerals are usually held by the government. They usually acquired or they're reserved by the government, and these rights are given on a contractual basis to contractors or investors, who then in turn pay huge amount of taxes and tariffs to the government for mining rights. We talked a little bit about easement in our part 1, and so easement is another element of the title which is allowing right of way to the property. But in the example that we saw in part 1, it was more on access to the property. But there are other aspects of easement such as utilities, water supply, drainage lines, electricity, broadband connection, your television, uh, cable lines, fiber optics. All these are considered to be essential utilities, and as per the Easement Act, no property owner can stop another property owner, be it a neighboring property or the property that's situated around them, to access these services. So, which primarily means that you cannot hinder someone from accessing all these basic utilities, so they may pass through your property, and that's what basically what easement means, and which often includes also air and light and wind in some cases. Another important aspect of title is tenancy or tenure. Now, in the Indian system, we had two types of tenure. One is old tenure, and another one is a new tenure. In the local vernacular language, old tenure is referred as Juni Sharat, and the new tenure is referred as Navi Sharat. Now, depending on the tenure, the farmers or the owners of the property were allowed to have land either on the basis of selling that land to someone else. And so in 1950, post independence in India, two types of these tenures developed. Now, if you look at the old tenure land, this is the land which the farmers bought from the government at the time for the purpose of agriculture, while the new tenure land is the land which was given for free for the purpose of farming only to the people who were existing farmers. A lot of these farmers had lost their land to landlords, or they had mortgaged it and they did not have money to buy it back. In which case, post independence, a lot of land was given for free to the farmers for the purpose of agriculture. The problem happens when, after 2-3 generations, when these farmers decide that we no longer want to do farming here, because either the city has expanded so much and there is an urban value attached to that particular piece of land. They decide that okay, let's sell this land. And when you go about to sell that land, the government is going to say, hey, wait, we had given this land to you for purpose of agriculture only, and it was given to you for free. Now you want to sell it to make a profit because of the urban growth. In which case, the new tenure land needs to be first converted into old tenure, which means that the original farmer or the landowner has to first buy it from the government by paying a premium. Usually this premium is 50% to 80% of the existing jantri or ready reckoner value at that given point of time. And only after converting this tenure from new tenure to old tenure can the landlord sell this land on the current market value. So that's one thing we understand with tenure. And when it comes to tenancy, we also have cases of chawls in Mumbai, where these are mostly given by the government for rental purpose, and they work in the same way. And that is why when you look at buying or selling of these properties, you have to try and understand what kind of tenancy is there under the Tenancy Act. Another type is the freehold and the leasehold property. Freehold land is again something very similar to old tenure land, where there is no restriction on holding or transfer of land, whereas in leasehold land there is a lease attached to the land, in which it becomes very difficult to sell that land, because these are long-term leases, 30 to 50 years or more. Like in case of Mumbai chawls, this is a very good case example of a leasehold land. And so if someone was to buy this land, it would not be possible for this person to demolish this structure and remove the lease that is existing, or the leaseholders of this land, and remove them. So this is the problem that happens when you are looking at a redevelopment project within an urban city, while the tenancy, that is old tenure or new tenure, is something that is a hindrance if you are considering to buy land for new development on the urban outskirts. Now, timber rights are attached with land. Either if you look at the definition of real estate in India or the immovable property, it does not include standing timber. However, all the timbers, the right to cut timber or to fell the trees and to sell it in the market or to export it or to treat it, are exclusive rights which needs to be purchased from the government, because not all land has those rights. So felling of timber is another right you have to look into, especially if you're dealing with forest land. Farming rights have been always been associated with agricultural land, and one of the key questions we ask is who has the right to farm. In India, agricultural land can only be owned by a farmer, so you need to be an agriculturist to own agricultural land, and a non-farmer cannot buy farming land. That's the rule that we have. In many countries have this system where what kind of crop can be grown and who has the right to farm, who has the right to harvest. Again, these two rights can be vested with different parties, and in many cases there is a lot of exploitation that happens for laborers or farmers who are uh, farming and harvesting in other people's land. So farming rights are very very exclusive, and especially in India, because farmers also receive subsidies, they receive a lot of income tax benefits, and it is not easy for in today's day and age for anyone to become a farmer. And we all know that all the land which is surrounding a city or urban center is primarily a farming land, and so you have to go through a process of NA procedure, which is called non-agricultural procedure. If you are not a farmer and if you want to buy a farming land with the intention for urban development, you have to bypass this particular right and make sure you convert the farmland into a non-agricultural use land before you can make a real estate development. Uh, Grazing rights have always been associated with cattle and domestic animals, especially in villages and rural centers. And there have been exclusive lands allotted by the government which have been used for grazing. In a local vernacular language, we call it gaucher lands, and these are the lands which government had reserved for the cattle to graze. So again, that's one area where if you are purchasing a land or investing in a land, and if it happens to fall within the grazing zone where this rights have been given by the government, then there are a lot of procedures you need to follow before you can convert this land into a real estate development. Hunting is banned in India. There is practically no forest in India where you're allowed to hunt. There may be some small portions where things are happening illegally, but again, hunting rights are associated with the land. If you travel to the continent of Africa, you will see many countries offering safaris and hunting rights. But again, then those countries are dependent on tourism and hunting as a basic revenue source. But again, you have to look into the fact, because forest lands cannot be bought for environmental reasons for any real estate development, nor can those be used to offer hunting rights, especially in India. Air rights apply to ideally height of a building, how high can you construct. But again, I would associate that with the development rights, which we'll talk about in subsequent slides. But air rights are the rights that different countries have, especially when they're operating their aircraft carriers or airplanes. And there are definite channels and places from where each airlines or each country airlines can pass, and you need to buy international air rights, especially when you're entering a different international you crossing a different international boundary of different countries. And so for this reason, you have many flights taking off from certain places, and they don't always follow a straight path or a shortest path to reach their destination, because many times they don't have air rights to enter into certain airspaces of certain countries. So as you may know it, air right is again a right that's associated and connected with land, but in this case it's on a very larger scale. Building bylaws are the most important governing rights that would decide the ultimate economics and profitability of a real estate project. This include margins around the building, This include the setback, this include the height of the building, this include the FSI or the FAR available, this include the amount of open space that you need to provide in a residential or a commercial development. It also specifies small details in many cases, like the minimum height between floors, uh, restrictions on the size of housing units. So all this would encompass what we call development rights or a building bylaws. And again, these rights are with the local municipal or local urban governing bodies uh, in a in a particular city, and they may vary from city to city, they may vary state to state, and there is no national level uh, code or no national level fixed regulation that applies to the entire country. Although there are some general guidelines or what we call national building code that allows it gives guidelines to the urban development bodies on what kind of building bylaws they should have. But again, it boils down to the urban planning uh, ideology of the governing body in a particular urban area as to what kind of building bylaws they wish to follow. Apart from so there are two major kind of building bylaws, one which are rigid and fixed, which would have fixed margins, fixed heights, and then there are volumetric building bylaws where the height of the building is decided by the width of the road that is abutting to it. Okay. Appearance rights are again associated with the development rights, but they can vary again city to city. And again, appearance rights are governed not always by the local bodies. In a lot of European cities, you have an appearance rights uh, uh, under the act, in which what kind of colors each development can have, and they have to choose between a certain set of colors, uh, part of the urban design exercise that they have. uh, in India, I think Jaipur is known as a pink city in Rajasthan, and there they have an appearance right building bylaws where they require certain buildings in certain areas to have pink color. But even if you look at the Archaeological Society of India, ASI, a lot of heritage properties, if you end up buying a heritage property, you may not be allowed to change its appearance or demolish it or temper it with any way if it's classified as an heritage property. And so all you can do is you can what we call maintain that property for some economic use, be it a hotel or a resort or some kind of uh, recreational activity, such that the appearance of that particular property is not damaged. So again, appearance right may be attached with the development right, like building bylaws, or in some cases, especially in India, in case of heritage properties, these are again rights owned by the central government, and they apply to all the heritage property across India. So this is the end of part 2, and these were some of the other elements of title which were important. And in the third part, we're going to look at the entire process of title search and investigation and how it impacts, and all the elements that we have looked in from part 1 and 2. We will be covering that, and what are the key guidelines that one should keep in mind when considering investing in a real estate property, or considering uh, uh, understanding the different legal aspects of a real estate property, especially when dealing with its transfer, its use, and its ultimate disposition to another party. Okay, thank you.